Welcome, students, once again to section 4 of Unit 3, which really discusses theories of adolescent development. Now, by way of section objectives, let me indicate that by the end of this session, you are expected to be able to, 1, explain in your own words what a theory is. 2, outline the functions of developmental theories. 3, describe the characteristics of a good theory. And then 4, discuss 3 common theories that explain adolescence. Now to begin with, what is a theory? We have it here that a theory is a systematic statement underlining principles that describe a particular phenomena. So in this case, it is the adolescent development. A theories of adolescent development are useful tools for understanding the nature of adolescent development. They are examples of development theories. Again, that is functions of developmental theories. 1, they provide a framework or background for understanding the challenges a person typically faces at a particular time of life and predicts the next line in development. Of course, in other words, they provide structures that can hold and support a theory of a research study. In this way, they help counselors to be able to predict what will happen next. 2, they can relate one fact to another. This also means that 2 facts can be linked to each other and predict their products. And an example can be cited of Piaget, who urges or who argues in his theory of cognitive changes in adolescents that adolescents develop the ability to deal with abstracts. This theory can be used to link one fact to the other and to predict that adolescents who can use abstracts will be more likely to focus on developing a meaningful philosophy of life. Now the third one, they can help us to form questions for further studies. This also explains that adopting a theory leads to asking particular questions. For example, a theory that emphasizes the importance of a role model will ask questions about role models available in the teen's life. Now, what is a good theory? A good theory should be 1, inclusive, and that is they cover a considerable amount of ground. B, it should be testable, and that is also each theory should lead to testable questions that confirm the way the theory operates. This can take form of hypothesis testing. Now, say it should be economical, and that is introduce few new terms as possible to explain behavior. And here, behaviors like brave or braveness, sensitive, kindness. And then the last one, which is D, it should be clear and concise. Here also talks about that fact that new terms should be defined precisely and understandably, and their meaning should not be open to any debate, meaning that terms should not have different meanings or different meanings to create confusions. Now, theories of adolescent interpretation. Now we have a very good number of theories on adolescent interpretation. But for the sake of our discussions, we are going to have a look at only three of them. And these are Freud's psychoanalytic theory, Erikson's psychosocial development, and Kohlberg's theory of moral development. So, Freud's psychoanalytic interpretation of adolescent development. In explaining behavior, Freud proposed that human beings are born with a basic instinctual energy called the libido. In fact, he later became convinced that this basic energy was characterized by a strong sexual component, and further indicates that the libido constantly moves and flows, and that the behavior of an individual is really determined by that. Sigmund Freud then proposed that psychosexual energy, that is the libido, centers on the organs of the body where the greatest amount of sensational gratification occurs at different ages. For instance, the oral and phallic stages occur during the preschool period, followed by a latency period during the elementary school years. Now, when puberty is achieved at a later stage, the libido centers on the sex organs, and that is why it is called the genital. Freud then theorized that the beginning of the elementary school years, that's during the latency period, the boy admires his mother and female teachers, but identifies with his father and other male adults. And the girl also does the same thing towards her father and identifies with her mother and older females, such as teachers. By the end of this elementary school, the child becomes quite self-sufficient and confident, and is at ease with friends or companions. Then, just as this stability becomes established, it is disrupted by advent of puberty. Now, with the maturation of the sex organs, adolescents experience a strong attraction to members of the opposite sex. But since genital desires cannot be gratified directly, that is, in many cases, the post-pubescent boy or girl may find release through sexual jokes, single-minded interests in things like collections or hobbies, and same-sex activities. Boys then tend to be hostile to girls and belittle them, partly of fear and envy. Girls, on the other hand, are likely to engage in strenuous outbursts of boyish activities, particularly when the growth spurt occurs, and then switch to interest in boys when menarche is achieved. All these tendencies and activities are forms of sublimation, thus a defense mechanism for expressing libidinal energy in socially acceptable ways not directly related to sexual activities. The young person develops heterosexual relationships and also consolidates aspects of personality. In some cases, a teenager who is unable to achieve this consolidation suffers prolonged adolescence. Finally, the young person who is afraid of becoming an adult attempts to remain an adolescent. Erikson's psychosocial interpretation of adolescent identity is the next subtopic we would like to have a look at. Now, Erikson's psychosocial theory emphasizes the search for identity during adolescent years, and this encompasses people's understanding of themselves, one another, and the world around them changes during the course of development. In developing this theory, Erikson based his view on the ego, that is the conscious mind of a person and effect of culture as he socializes. Aside that, his theory derived from what he refers to as the epigenetic principle. Of course, this principle states that anything that grows has a ground plan out of which the parts arise, each part having its time of special ascendancy until all the parts have arisen to form a functioning whole. Again, the theory has 8 developmental stages, and each stage has a pair of crises to resolve. Here, a child who has had favorable experiences during the first 4 stages will develop a stable and positive self-concept. The 5th stage of the theory, identity versus role confusion, is really involved adolescents. This stage is a time of major testing as the adolescents try to determine what is unique and especially about themselves. They attempt to discover who they are, what their strengths are, and what kinds of roles they are best suited to play for the rest of their lives. And that is, in short, their identity. Again, during the identity versus role confusion period, pressures to identity of what one wants to do with one's life are seriously and extremely felt, because these pressures come at a time of major physical changes as well as important changes in what society expects of them. Adolescents can find the period, of course, very much difficult. Another important characteristic of this stage is a decline in reliance on adults for information, with a shift towards using the peer group as a source of social judgment. This really makes the group becomes increasingly important, enabling adolescents to form close adult-like relationships and helping them to clarify their personal identities. Erickson further indicates that adolescence is a critical period in human development just because it is the last stage of childhood, with its attendants key characteristics being search for identity and role confusion as its primary danger. In fact, the adolescent process becomes complete only when the individual has subordinated his childhood identifications to a new kind of identifications achieved in absorbing sociability and in competitive apprenticeship with and among age group. And of course, these new identifications are no longer characterized by the playfulness of childhood. He then points out 6 roles and occupational choice as 2 aspects of behaviors being very significant to the young person who is at the verge of adulthood. Finally, he also indicates that the identity versus role confusion stage marks a crucial point in psychosocial development, paving the way for continued growth and future development of personal relationships. For example, the intimacy versus isolation stage, and that is spanning the early adulthood from age 18 to age 30. Now, the next theories that we will consider is Kohlberg theory of moral development. Now, for him, Morality is defined as a concept that involves judgment or evaluation of action. It is associated with the use of words like good, bad, right, wrong, ought, and should. Besides, it involves knowing right from wrong, good from bad, and what ought or should be done. Now, because adolescents are capable of reasoning on a higher plan, having attained Piaget's former operational stage of cognitive development, they are able to understand broad moral principles, which enables them to make such judgment or evaluation. And developing moral principles always becomes crucial in the adolescent development. Now, Kobeck then developed a major theory of moral development. In the theory, he indicated that people pass through a series of stages in the growth of their sense of justice and in the kind of reasoning they use to make moral judgments. He further suggested that the changes that occur in moral reasoning can best be understood as a three-level sequence, with each level divided into two stages. Finally, he indicated that while these view morality in terms of broad principles such as justice and fairness, women see it in terms of responsibility towards individuals and willingness to make sacrifices to hold a specific individual within the context of a particular relationship. So now we have a table from Kobeck, and this one explains what he really means. The first actually talks about pre-conventional morality, which has two stages, and then conventional morality, which also has two stages, and then the last, that is post-conventional morality, which also has two stages. And so for their explanations, the first one, which talks about the pre-conventional morality. At this level, the concrete interests of the individual are considered in terms of rewards and punishments. At stage one of that, obedience and punishment orientation, it talks about that. People stick to rules in order to avoid punishment, and for that matter, obedience occurs for its own sake. Now, for the second stage, which actually talks about reward orientation, explains that rules are followed only for a person's own benefit. Therefore, obedience occurs just because of rewards that are achieved. Now, for the second level, which talks about conventional morality, here people approach moral problems as members of society. They are interested in pleasing others by acting as good members of society. For 8 stages, the third one, which talks about good boy morality. At this stage, individuals show interest in maintaining the respect of others and doing what is expected of them. For the fourth stage, which talks about authority and other maintaining morality, this one also explains that people conform to society's rule and consider that right is what society defines as right. Now, the last stage of level, which talks about post-conventional level, is where people use moral principles which are seen as broader than those of any particular society. Now, at 8th stage, and that is stage 5, morality of constructs, individual rights, and democratically accepted law. Here, People do what is right because of a sense of obligation to laws which are agreed upon within society. And then finally, the last one, which actually talks about morality of individual principles and conscience, also explains that the person follows laws because the laws are based on universal ethical principles, and those that violate the principles are disobeyed. Thank you.